Just recently, a video was released of what is said to be the best UFO footage ever. The pilot of a small plane was flying when he caught a UFO on camera fly right past him. The pilot is George A. Arteaga. He spotted the craft while flying over Colombia. This footage is said to be the best proof we have that aliens exist. And in honor of that, I thought for today's video, we'll do a countdown of some scary alien encounters that are said to be real. Starting off this countdown, we have the alien abduction. Back in 1956, an American Air Force Sergeant Jonathan P. Lovett and Major William Cunningham were out searching the desert for debris from a recent missile launch in New Mexico. That's when Cunningham heard Lovett let out a huge scream. When he rushed over to him, he claimed to have seen Lovett being pulled up off the ground by a UFO. Lovett was then pulled inside the craft and it took off. Cunningham radioed for help, and when help arrived, they found Cunningham in absolute shock. He was then taken to a nearby hospital. They then started investigating his claims and the area. According to the military, there was an unidentified object in that area detected on their radar. So Cunningham was telling the truth. Now here's where it gets even more messed up. 3 days later, Lovett's body was found 10 miles away. It was severely mutilated and drained of blood. So could it be that he was literally abducted by aliens and they killed him? What's even suspicious is that the government did report on this, and then all of a sudden their report just vanished into thin air. Like they didn't want people to find out. In our 9th spot today, we have Falcon Lake. Now this has to be one of Canada's most famous UFO encounters. So on May 20th of 1967, 2 glowing objects descended from the sky near Falcon Lake in Manitoba. This was witnessed by a man named Stephen Mikulik. Apparently, one of these weird crafts even landed close to him. He decided to go investigate, and when he got close to it, it shot off and went back into the sky. In fact, the beam of light from the craft as it took off set his clothes on fire. He was left with a bunch of strange burns on his body and on his clothes. The burn marks were in the shape of random dots on his chest. Following this encounter, he fell very ill. As a result of this UFO encounter, the Canadian Mint released a special glow-in-the-dark Stefan-inspired coin in 2018. Now, if this was one big hoax, I don't think they would be releasing a coin in honor of someone lying. You know what I'm saying? But I don't know. It's really weird. Maybe he did see aliens. In our 8th spot today, we have the destroyed evidence. On the morning of July 24th, 1948, 2 pilots were flying from Houston to Atlanta with their 20 passengers. That's when they saw a UFO fly by them clear as day. This was witnessed by the 2 pilots and one of the passengers. The other passengers were fast asleep when this happened. One of the pilots said, and I quote, "It was clear there were no wings present, that it was powered by some jet or other type of power, shooting flame from the rear some 50 feet. There were 2 rows of windows which indicated an upper and lower deck, and from inside these windows a very bright light was glowing. Underneath the ship there was a blue glow of light." Now they all watched the craft for about 10 seconds until it disappeared completely. They reported their findings, and then the US government launched a top-secret investigation into it. In the end, their findings were destroyed, which means it could be a real UFO sighting, because if the evidence was fake, why would the government then try to hide or get rid of this evidence? You know what I'm saying? In our 7th spot today, we have Project Blue Book. In June of 1947, pilot Kenneth Arnold was out flying his small plane when he saw 9 strange objects moving at high speeds through the skies near Washington's Mount Rainier. They were flying in a V formation and were glowing a bright bluish-whitish light. After his claims went public, a number of other people started witnessing similar things. And then the US Air Force started to investigate these sightings. This gave birth to Operation Sign in 1948, and then Project Blue Book in 1952. Over the years, they gathered evidence of more than 12,000 UFO sightings. In fact, this project is considered the longest running of the US government's official inquiries into UFO sightings. In the end, 90% of the cases were identified. Like, for example, it was either an airplane or a weather balloon flying by. But that 10%, 700 cases, were listed as UFOs. In our 6th spot today, we have the Sick Soldiers. This next encounter took place in North Korea in 1951 during the Korean War, and it impacted a number of Korean soldiers. So in May of 1951, Korean soldiers were preparing to bomb a nearby village. That's when they encountered a strange craft. According to the men, the craft emitted some sort of ray that made their ears burst. One man then said they were swept by some ray that was emitting pulses. Like a lighthouse light, you could tell when it was pointed directly at you. After this weird attack, the men were left very sick. They all had to be taken to the hospital. Some say they were attacked by a real UFO. Others say that it was a high-tech Soviet death ray. To this day, we don't know what it is, but it's super weird that this device made them fall so ill. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with the Mantell UFO incident. Now, this was actually named after Captain Thomas F. Mantell, who was an Air National Guard pilot who sadly lost his life chasing a UFO. So on January 7th of 1948, Godman Army Airfield at Fort Knox received a report of a weird aerial object near Madisonville, Kentucky. They said that it was a weird floating object around 250 to 300 feet in diameter. So the Air Force sent Thomas to investigate. Sadly, while investigating, his plane crashed and he lost his life. Here's the thing. Mantell was a very experienced pilot. He had spent over 2,000 hours in the air, so it's not like him to just randomly crash like that. So people blame his death and crash for the UFO that was supposedly in the air. The UFO was described as being very white with red borders at the bottom. Some even said that they saw it hover down and then it shot back into the sky at a very fast rate to about 10,000 feet. And its speed was greater than 500 miles per hour in level flight. To this day, we don't truly know what happened to Thomas Mantell. In our 4th spot today, we have the Berkshire UFOs. On September 1st of 1969, a number of unrelated people claimed to have seen a bunch of strange lights. Some people that saw these lights even claimed that they were abducted by it. After seeing the lights, time randomly passed and they don't know what happened to the hours that they lost. One of the people that witnessed this was Melanie Kirchdorfer. That night, she and her family went to a Dairy Queen to get ice cream, and then they went to a nearby lake. While her father backed into the parking lot, a strange aura came around the car. They don't remember much after that happened. But Melanie remembers being levitated in mid-air and then being on a spacecraft. Now, a man named Tom Warner remembers being on the spaceship as well and remembers seeing Melanie beside him. Before that, they never even knew each other. The same night, Jane and her friend Mary were driving home when they saw several bright lights in front of them. Her and a couple of cars in front of her actually pulled over because the lights were so bright, so they wanted to know what the heck was happening. Also, they were so bright that they couldn't see where to drive. When they got out of their car, they saw a huge object floating over the road in front of them. And other people in the area shared very similar stories from that night as well. So it's quite creepy that this happened to so many different people and they were all strangers. So it's not like they all came together and just fabricated this lie. They all had similar encounters. In our 3rd spot today, we have Terrell Copeland. In 2007, former United States Marine Terrell Copeland had his first experience with an alien. He was in his apartment when he saw this orb of light flying outside his apartment. He said, and I quote, "It was just a big ball of light. It wasn't moving. One was solid white, the other was directly across the street from it, up 300 feet above the ground, and was changing colors very rapidly." The next thing he remembered was feeling like something was really wrong, and then he passed out. When he woke up, he heard someone trying to enter his apartment. The person was moving the doorknob and scratching at the door trying to get in. He tried getting up from his bed, but he was completely paralyzed. He tried to reach for his weapon, but that's when he heard a voice through the door say, "You don't need that weapon. We won't harm you." When he finally was able to move, he lost 4 hours of his time. He believes that he was abducted by aliens. He says that he remembers being in a room with a woman who he says was definitely not human. He said, and I quote, "She had the typical black eyes that you hear about. She had an elongated skull, and that startled me. And the next memory I have is me standing on my balcony waving at the cylinder-shaped ship. That is so freaky." In our 2nd spot, we have pilot Frederick Valentich. On October 21st of 1978, Australian pilot Frederick Valentich was partaking in a 125 nautical mile training flight when he disappeared into thin air. It is important to note that Frederick was a very experienced pilot. So around 7:06 p.m. that night, he radioed to his crew saying that an unidentified craft was actually following him. He described it as having 4 bright lights with a shiny metallic exterior. His final words were, "It's hovering, it's not an aircraft." Then the signal cut out and he was never heard from again. Frederick or his craft were never seen again. Now, many people think that he was shot down or abducted by a UFO. In fact, an unidentified farmer in the area said that he saw a UFO nearly 90 feet in length hovering above his farm. He saw this UFO the morning of Frederick's disappearance. He then said that he saw a plane stuck to the UFO leaking oil. So could this be Frederick's craft? In the end, his body or his plane were never found. And in our number 1 spot today, we have the Roswell UFO. This is said to be the most famous UFO case in America. So it takes place during the summer of 1947. A rancher named W.W. MacBrazel said he found wreckage on his big plot of land. In fact, during that time, there were a number of UFO sightings, so the rancher thought that the wreckage on his land was from a UFO. So he brought the material to a sheriff who then brought the material to an officer from the U.S. Army Air Force. Later, the U.S. Army announced that what the rancher found was a flying disc. But then the following day, the U.S. Army quickly reversed themselves. And they were like, oh, no, it's not a UFO. It's like debris from a weather balloon. Years later, in 1994, they admitted that the weather balloon story had been completely bogus. It wasn't wreckage from a weather balloon. Over the years, hundreds of UFO sightings have been reported in the area. Several eyewitnesses also claimed that they saw alien bodies being taken from a government test site. But the government was just like, no, those aren't aliens, those were just dummies. You're seeing things. So now there's a bunch of conspiracy theories surrounding Roswell. It seems like the government might be hiding aliens there. All right, folks, that's all for today's video. If you're into aliens and UFOs, then let me know in the comments below. Also, let me know if you have any UFO sightings of your own. I'm very curious, or actual footage of it. Ooh. While you're down there commenting, make sure you smash that like button. Obviously, subscribe to my channel. Road to 100K, baby. I've been your host, Lindsay Ivan. Stick around for some bloopers if there is any, and I'll see you when I see you. Bye. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with the Mantell. Mantell UFO. Other people say that they saw a... In our 3rd spot today, we have Terrell Copeland. Terrell Copeland? Copeland? In our 3rd spot today, we have Terrell Copeland. Say it really fast, they don't know. Sorry.